Okay, here we are at part 2. Actually, it's just the final assembly of the new Foki robot. And basically, if you watched part 1, this is where all the parts ended up, and I was basically waiting for the battery box to glue itself in. So what we want to do now is just take all our wires and wire things up. So I'm passing the 2 motor wires through this opening, you can see right there. And I just want to get them out here where we can solder on them. I'd already tested the motor earlier and knew that red is positive and black is negative, the robot would walk forward. It's kind of important to know. Had it been the other way around, it wouldn't matter. I would just wire things up a little bit differently here. And the head, we were waiting for it to glue and dry. And the 2 wires from the LEDs, again, red is positive and black is negative. So we're going to take us all of our negative wires and solder them together. First I'm going to twist them together. The battery one is kind of short. I'm not 100% sure I can twist it. I may just have to solder it. And I'm going to be using this standard little switch that I use in all my projects. It's basically 19 millimeters between the 2 mounting holes, and you do have to come up with your own number 2 machine thread screw. When you buy these switches, they never come with the mounting screws. And because it actually is a double pole, double throw switch, I bend the 2 sections over and just solder them like that. But we're going to be using the 2 outside sections. This is a break before make switch, meaning that these 2 outside connectors never electrically become connected with each other. The center, as you move the switch back and forth, will either connect over here or connect over here. And since this is a break before make switch, which I've tested to make sure, because I've had some of these that weren't, we can solder our 2 battery connections, like the negative on one side and the positive on the other. And then what we want switched, which will be the motor and the LEDs, we'll solder in the center. And it gives you a very neat way to handle the wiring so things are not so crappy looking. I'm not sure if the soldering gun's warmed up yet. Let's find out. Yep, seems to be. So basically I'm trying to glop the negatives all together there. Then I'm going to take the motor positive red and the LED positive red, and I'm going to connect those 2 together by themselves. In fact, it's a lot hotter than it needs to be. And I take the switch, and we're going to go ahead and tin up the connections on the switch so that it's easier to solder the wires on. Like so. This is the remaining red wire off the battery holder, positive. It should be all by itself at this point. I'm going to solder it to one of the outside leads of the switch. Doesn't matter which one at this point. There we go. Then the motor positive and the LED positive, I'm going to solder to the center connector of the switch. I can try zooming this in. Whether it'll be in the camera's field of view or not, I don't know. We'll see. Like so. And then we can take all of the negative wires, in this case they happen to be black, and solder them to that remaining outside connector of the switch. There. Okay. Now, what we want to do is test things, make sure everything is working before we proceed. We're grabbing a couple of AAA batteries. And let's get them in there. There we we go. And let's turn the switch on. Okay, and I have lights, and I can hear the motor running. Yep, we have the motor running, and it's running the correct direction. And as you can see, when it runs, the plunger's up here for the arms. Can you see that? If I get it closer, see how those move? And they're held in those slots that we put them in earlier. Those are going to push up against these levers and make the arms move. So let's shut things down here. Now the switch can solder it, not solder, but screw in place. There is an opening in the back of the head. And like I said earlier, you do need to have your own machine screws for that. Number 2. The back of the head being wide open because of that, the black part that the LEDs are on. It's a good place just to cram any excess wires rather than cutting wires short. Leave the wires alone. You never know when you might have to get back in there and fool around. So let's just leave them the way they are. Here's one of them. If you're not familiar, the machine screw, it's the non-pointy type. You can see there. Use what you got. If you don't have screws, then hold the switch in place with some glue, or maybe hot melt glue. Okay. So the only wires we don't want to cram up in here would be the motor wires. The LED eye light wires, they can get crammed in there. The 2 battery box wires, they get crammed in there. But the 2 motor wires, we need those to hang out the bottom so that we can separate the robot parts to and basically this whole headpiece is going to have to get glued onto here. And typically when I glue it on there, rather than using the weld-on number 16, since it's a permanent glue, I'll go ahead and use a surface glue like the E6000. I'll just put a little dab on the inside of the front and a little dab on the inside of the back. And that way, if I ever had to get back in there again, I could take a long flat blade and just cut between the 2 pieces and sever it. If I used the weld-on 16, you're not getting them apart. You're going to end up busting the parts trying to get it apart, which means you got to print new ones. And why go to all that work? Okay, let's put a dab. Let's put a little dab on the inside of this. And a little dab on the back. That should all get pushed up into place when we shove this thing together. The thing I'm fighting here is the battery wires are fighting me, like so. And as far as putting this thing together, let's just slide that on down. Now normally at this point I wouldn't be running it. I would actually either tape the head down or hold it down with a rubber band. I want to make sure it glues in the right place. But since we are trying to shoot a video, as I was saying, in the end I'll end up holding the top of the body on. Again, I'm going to use a little number 2, and this time it's like a self-tapping screw. But you could use any kind of screw you got laying around. Maybe you've got a small wood screw laying around. Maybe you've got a screw that you removed from something from the dollar store. I bet you've got a screw lying around that you can use just for holding these together. It wasn't so important to hold them together when the arms weren't mechanically linked, but now that we have them mechanically linked, it's more important. Okay. Hey, it works. And you should be able to adjust the arms to some extent if you want them to raise a little bit more. Maybe they don't need to drop so far back. Okay, let's, because I didn't tighten those screws all the way, you can adjust your arms. This is a very rough surface, and you see with those little wheels on the outside edge, works very well. Am I pulled all the way back? I guess I am. So there you have it. There is part 2, the final assembly of the Foki robot new version.